We are in the divine mind of God 24/7, or we would just cease to be. If He'd stopped thinking about us for a second, we would not be here. That's love. That's huge love. Huge love. I looked deep into His eyes, and it was like I could see His soul. And His eyes turned this beautiful blue color. Even though they were brown, I could see this blue, this brilliant sky blue. And it was like I was looking into His soul. And so I kind of backed up a little bit, and it was like, I looked at Him again and they were brown again.
Sharon, thank you so much for doing this. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. My first near-death experience happened when I was 13. And we went down to the Y here in the town where I live, taking swimming lessons. We were down to the 10-foot section of the pool, and the instructor wanted me to dive in head first like this. And I watched all the other kids do it, and I was terrified. They were going in and coming out okay, but there was something that just terrified me about it. And he told me, he said, "You will do this dive or I will throw you in." And the next thing I know, he's picking me up around the waist and he threw me in the water. And I think I was just really shocked by what he had done. But I struggled in the water for a minute or two, and it wasn't very long. And I just sunk to the bottom. I'm laying on the bottom of the pool and I could see the water rippling on the top. I could see all the way around the pool, and I could see my mom, who was clear on the other end at the three-end section up in the balcony where the parents were sitting. I could see her face. She was leaning over the banister and she was screaming, and her face, her eyes, it was like her face was right in front of me. And I heard the lifeguard in the 3-foot section with the little children. I heard her yell at my instructor. She said his name and she said, "Go in and get her." And then I could see him and he was just frozen and he couldn't move. And I heard people screaming and people just, yelling and all kinds of stuff. And while all this commotion was going on around the outside of the pool, I looked up and I could see this beautiful, beautiful light. And at first I thought it was a light bulb in the pool. And I thought to myself, what was a light bulb doing in the pool? And then the light just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and closer and closer. And I don't know if I was going up to it or it was coming down to me, but it was getting really big. And it was a brilliant white light, but it was so soft on my eyes. It didn't hurt my eyes at all. And I felt just love come through this light. And I wasn't cold. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't hurting anywhere. I was just laying on the bottom of 10 feet of water and just enveloped by this light. And then all of a sudden, just before the light was like this close to me, I hear what sounds like a metal door slam and it echoes. And then I'm coughing up all this water and the pain was just horrific. I was throwing up and coughing and what had happened was the lifeguard that was with in the 5-foot section with the middle-aged children had actually had to come in and get me. And he was doing, the CPR and trying to get me to breathe as he was getting me out of the pool onto the side. And when he finally got me breathing, I looked around and all I could see was people's legs. There's so many people standing around me on the side of the pool. And I saw people's legs and then I saw my mom's face. I had no idea what had happened. And my mom, I think, was so terrified that she never really talked to me about it. I never really understood, as a young child, what that was about. I had never heard of NDEs or anything else. I didn't know what in the world that was, but we never did talk about it. And I never did go back. And no, I do not know how to swim. So that was the first one that I experienced.
Was it after that first one that you had an experience with Jesus in the church? Would you like to
Yeah.
share that?
Okay. I was 15 and there were things happening in my life that just, I'll just say that these things were happening in my life and I went to an adult about it and the adults told me that no, this wasn't happening. It was all in my head when I knew that it really was happening. And I started questioning my own sanity and I was going to commit suicide and I never told anybody. It's when you have a child that doesn't talk about it that it becomes very dangerous because I didn't have a plan, but I knew I was going to do it and that was going to be it. At the same time, I was a member of the youth choir in my church, and it was a Good Friday, and we had been asked to go to a neighboring church to sing. So I went, and by that time I was real shy and backward and quiet. So I was sitting in the way back, and there were two levels, and we were down at the bottom on the bottom floor, and we were practicing to go up into the main church to sing our part. And actually, the song was Up to Jerusalem. I'll never forget it. So I'm sitting there in the back by myself, and then there's two women sitting in front of me. And then in front of them was two of the daughters of one of the women. And then in front of them was the rest of the choir. And we had a big choir, lots of instruments, lots of singing parts and so on. There was only one door in and one door out. And it was a big wooden door and it was right onto the street. And that was it. So I'm sitting there and I don't know where this man came from because he didn't come through the door. But anyway, he walks in, and as soon as I see him from a distance, I could tell that the energy in the room changed. It was lighter and brighter, and just, I don't even know how to explain it, but the whole energy changed, and I knew that there was great holiness in the room, and that as he walked closer to me, I could see who it was, and I'm sitting there, a 15-year-old girl, and I was like, oh my God, that's Jesus. And so he sits down right next to me and he smiles at me and he says, where do I go to sit? My mouth went just as dry as a bone. I couldn't say a word. My tongue felt like it was this big, and I was like, oh, I didn't know what to say. So the two women that were sitting in front of me, they turned around and they started to answer his question and tell him where to go to sit. At the same time that he was talking to them, he looked at me and he said, what is happening to you in your life is happening. You are not crazy. I love you. I'm with you. Don't be afraid. And then he got up. And when he got up, he put his finger on the elbow of the lady in front who had arthritis so bad she couldn't bend her arm. And so he healed her arm. And then he went upstairs and he was sitting in the main church, and the main church had this gigantic stained glass window. I mean, all the pews were in front of this window. So, I mean, you had to sit in front of this window. No, there was no place else to go. So he's sitting there and he's like in the first or second pew. And we're up on the, I don't know if it was an altar or a stage or what it was, but it was an elevated area. And so we were sitting up there and we were singing. And I couldn't tell you if there was anybody else in that church or not, because I only had eyes for him. And I sang my heart out to him. It was like, I've never sang like that before, just feeling it so strong. And it was just for him. At one point, he put his hands over his face like this. And I don't know if he was praying or remembering or crying. I don't know what he was doing. But when he got up, after we were done singing, the two girls that were sitting in front of the two ladies, he had told them that he liked our singing. And then he disappeared. He just, as he started to walk away, it was like he just disappeared. And one of the ladies is still alive, and we talk about it all the time. She remembers. And even over the course of many years, I would contact these ladies off and on. Did we really see that? Did that really happen? Am I crazy? No, we saw him. He was there. So he was so beautiful. And what I find interesting is that he said exactly what I needed to hear. And I never told anybody, so I know that he reads our hearts. And so he knew what was in my heart. And he said exactly what I needed to hear to keep me from doing that. And he healed that other lady. And then what he said to the other girls, but there was just me and 4 other women that saw him. Nobody else in the choir did. And when we would say, oh my gosh, did you see Jesus? They were like, Jesus, where was Jesus? We didn't see him. Well, he was sitting right there in front of you, but they didn't. Just me and 4 other women saw him. He is probably, I'd say 5'10", 5'11" tall. He's muscular, but slim built. He had dark olive complexion. He had beautiful brown eyes and very long, dark, wavy hair. I mean, very long, not just up to here, but long. And a close cut beard, and he had dimples when he smiled. And what I found interesting about his eyes were when he was sitting next to me, his eyes were brown. But the more I looked, when he was talking to me, I looked deep into his eyes, and it was like I could see his soul. And his eyes turned this beautiful blue color. Even though they were brown, I could see this blue, this brilliant sky blue. And it was like I was looking into his soul. And his soul was so perfect and so spotless. And everybody says your eyes are the mirror to your soul. And so that's what I was seeing, was his spotless soul. And it looked like this sky blue with no clouds, no stars, just brilliant, beautiful blue. And so I kind of backed up a little bit, and it was like, I looked at him again and they were brown again. And it was like, so he was just beautiful. It was beautiful. He's visited a couple times physically.
Listening last night where you were telling about the second time that you saw him.
The last time I saw him, and that was will be about 6 years. It'll be 6 years ago. And my mother had Alzheimer's, and I was her caregiver. And it was a particularly difficult day because, it's like you watch your loved one disappear in front of your face, and there's not a thing you can do about it. And so I was feeling really like I really needed to do something to stop it, and I didn't know what. So it was her nap time. I put her to bed, and the way I would decompress would be to scrub the kitchen or clean whatever. So I was scrubbing the kitchen floor. And so I'm just mopping away and minding my own business, cleaning. And I hear this noise behind me, and I turn around, and there he's standing, and he's leaning up against the counter, just casually, and he had his arms crossed like this and his feet crossed at the ankles. He was wearing a white, beautiful linen shirt that you don't, not tucked in or anything, just it looked like a tunic shirt of some sort. And then it looked like a khaki casual lounge type pants or whatever. And he was barefoot. And I noticed his feet were so beautiful. I thought, for a man, he's got gorgeous feet. But he had his feet crossed at the ankles. And he started talking to me. And again, he said something that only I knew about. It wasn't something that I had shared with anybody. Because with having all of these NDEs, I thought I'd been kicked out of heaven, because I keep getting sent back. Well, I never said that to anybody. So what I did was I guess he was reading my heart again. And so what he said to me was, you cry because you think I cast you away from me when you were with me in heaven. And that's so far from the truth. And I was just like, oh, because he knew that I actually had been crying over that and feeling that way and never telling anybody. And then he said, everything that's happened to you in your life has happened for a reason, and it's to prepare you for this job I have for you. And when I asked what the job was, he said, well, to love, because that's what you do best. And he said, and I want you to give me everything else. He said, when you are heavy burdened, when you are scared, when you don't feel like you can take another step, you just give that all to me. And I'll take care of that because I'm strong enough to do it. And all you need to do is just love. That's it, because that's what you do best. And it was just absolutely amazing what he was saying to me, because I, again, had never said anything to anyone about how I was feeling. And he was, it was so beautiful the way he can read hearts. He knows what's in your heart.
Would you like to jump back now and tell us about your second near-death experience?
Okay. This was in 2005, and I was sitting outside talking on a cordless phone. And the man I was married to at the time was an electrician. He just got home from work. And I asked him, because where I was sitting, there was these stairs, and there was this little part of the roof that came over the stairs. So I wasn't getting wet. I was dry, but I wasn't sure whether that was safe or not. So I asked him, I knew a corded phone would not be a good idea, but this was a cordless. And he said, yeah, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. So he went in the house. About 5 minutes later, I hear this rumble of thunder in the distance and then a loud crack. I could see the lightning bolt come right out of the sky. And when it did, it hit my arm. And then it traveled underneath me and it hit the transformer in front of our house and just blew it up.
Oh, wow.
And when it hit my arm, I felt this searing, burning, agonizing pain. And that lasted for a minute. And then it was like, I just peeled right up out of myself, just popped right up out like peeling a banana. And there I am crumpled on the ground, but then I'm standing in the yard and I'm going up the stairs and I go into my house and I'm looking at the stuff in my house and I'm thinking, okay, everything had this burnt gold look to it. And I couldn't figure that out. And I looked at the curtains, my lace curtains that were above my window where the sink was, and I noticed they weren't my curtains. And I thought, oh, that's really odd. I didn't know I was dead at that time. I had no idea. So I'm walking from the kitchen into the dining room, and the furniture in the dining room was not my stuff. So I started to, I was upset. I was like, this is my house, but nothing in this house is mine. So what is going on here? So I walked from the dining room into the living room and I noticed the same thing, that furniture wasn't mine. And I heard this old time radio show playing. It sounded like something that you would hear if you were watching the Waltons.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't figure out where that sound was coming from. I was looking around and I'd never had a radio like that in my house. So I was like, where is that noise? Where in the world? I couldn't find my family. And it was like, okay, so what's going on here? I started to panic. I really did. After all this, it was very weird. As soon as I started to panic, just at that moment, there was this huge, loving, formless presence that appeared. And no, I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. And I knew, intuition wise or feeling wise or whatever, that this presence was bigger than my house, or as big as my house. I mean, I had a 3-story house, so it was a big house. And it was like this presence was bending over. He was so big. And he just wrapped me up in this love, this huge, huge love. And I felt nothing, no fear, no worry, no pain, nothing. I was just wrapped in that love. And all of a sudden we didn't go up or down, we went sideways, and we moved very quickly through these magnificent pink and gold clouds. And they were absolutely breathtaking. And we moved very quickly laterally through these clouds. And when we got to the end of the clouds, there was the entrance to this beautiful garden. I could hear birds singing, the flowers, the colors were so rich and vibrant, the smells were sweet. The air even looked crystal clear. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. And these 2 young men stepped forward to greet me. And at first I thought they were angels. They were wearing they had hair like mine, only their hair was longer and curly, real curly, which my hair gets real curly if I don't straighten it. And their hair was a darker blonde with this color running through it. And they were wearing this very expensive, tightly woven linen clothing. And the picture of the weave pattern, it was like they wanted me to see this weave pattern, and this weave pattern meant something. It was important. So they it was like taking a snapshot of the weave pattern, and it was right here in my face. And I was like, okay, that's a herringbone weave. And I don't know what that means, but okay. It hit me. I was like, oh, all they had to do was smile. And once they smiled, I knew exactly who they were. They were my 2 brothers who had died as babies. And they looked exactly like my dad when my dad was a young man, only their hair was longer. And they were so beautiful, and they were glowing sort of from the inside out. And they were just breathtaking. And we had this wonderful family reunion. And they stayed with me. And after we met and, hugged and talked and whatever, we moved a little bit further into the garden. And that huge loving, my one brother got on one side and my other brother got on the other. And that huge loving presence moved from beside me to behind me. And then there was a whole bunch of other people that gathered around. And they were from all different time periods. And I knew them, but I didn't know where I knew them from. And everybody was smiling. There wasn't anybody there that was over the age of early 30s, and everybody, they were glowing from inside out, and their skin was, rosy, and everybody was healthy and young. And I saw women in gowns and men in fancy suits, and then people dressed just like we are. But again, I knew them, but I didn't know where I knew them from. And they all gathered around. And then there was it was like watching an old-fashioned black and white movie on an old-fashioned movie reel. And so I'm watching this movie, and it was my life from the time I was born until the time that I was hit by the lightning and died. I'm watching it, and it goes by so fast, like that fast, and it was over. And I thought, gosh, my life must have been boring. It was over so quick. And I thought, I'm missing something, and I'm not sure what it is I'm missing. So I asked my brothers, and they were like just smiling, and they were I thought, you're going to pull the brother card on me here. You're not going to answer me. I said, that's not right. But I guess what I was missing was that there was absolutely no judgment. I didn't feel judged, and I didn't realize I was supposed to be judging myself. And God didn't judge me, and I didn't judge me. So there was no judgment, and that was it. It was over. We were done, and then we were moving on to the next thing.
Mhm.
And so, and the next thing is I heard this male voice say, what you put into the universe, you will get back. But I'd never heard words like that before, so I didn't know what that meant. And then I started feeling like I was hooked up to a giant IV bottle of divine knowledge. And I started getting all of this like fusions of who was God, where was God, how the world was put together, and all the questions that people want to know the answers to. And it was like bam, 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 one aha moment after another. And it was so amazing. And I was the bliss and the joy of having this knowledge. And I found out that God is very simple. And we human beings make him so complicated, and he's not. And that I kept saying to him, oh God, you are so awesome. You're simple, and we human beings make you so complicated, and you're not complicated at all. And I just kept saying that over and over. He said, God, you're so awesome. And he actually showed me this like a professor writing on a chalkboard, and they were like 10 chalkboards long, and he was writing this equation that I couldn't read, much less understand. And it was so long. And God's response to that was like, that's not how it is. And so it was like a confirmation to when I was saying, we make you complicated and you're not. So he was like saying, yeah, exactly. My brothers started walking me through the garden, and I could see the colors and hear the birds, and I saw landscapes and houses and buildings, and just it was all so beautiful. And the colors were so rich and vibrant, and the smells, the sweetness. I heard music, and I learned that everything has a vibration, even colors have a vibration. The music was like the rocks had a vibration, the water that I saw in the lake, the river, or whatever, it was like sparkled like 1,000 diamonds in this water, and it had a vibration, and leaves have a different vibration, and each color has a vibrational sound. And when you put all of those different sounds together, you get this magnificent orchestra. I call it big music because it had bells and drums and pianos and stringed instruments of every kind. All these different sounds come together, and it was like everything in heaven was singing praises to God. And it was so beautiful. It was absolutely gorgeous. So then my brothers and I are walking through the garden, and all this is going on, and I'm just like what I call in the wow factor. I'm just blown away. Yeah, I was like a feather on the breath of God, just floating away and going with it. And there's this grove of trees, and people have asked me what was the trees. I have no idea what the trees were, but there was a grove of trees. And Jesus comes walking out of this grove of trees, and he walks up to me. Well, when he walks up to me, my brothers disappear. I have no idea where they went. But he said to me, and he looked exactly the same as he had when I saw him before. Only this time he was wearing a white robe or gown or whatever you call it. And he said to me, and this was my first clue that I was going to have to come back, but it went right over my head, and I didn't catch it. But I love you. I'm with you now. Don't be afraid. I was like, okay, no problem. But I had no idea that was my clue that I was going to be coming back here. So he walks with me over to this wooded glen, and in this beautiful wooded glen, you could see the pine needles on the ground and pine cones and little blue flowers. And there was a stream, and there was a log. And I sat down on the end of the log, and there was a man on the other end of the log. Well, as I sat down, Jesus walks away, and then here's this man sitting there, and he had a stick, and he was kind of drawing into you know, doodling or drawing something in the pine cones in the dirt or whatever. And he looked at me, and I recognized this man was God. And he said, "What would you do if it was just me and you?" I was like, "What?" I didn't understand what he meant. And he said it again. "What would you do if it was just me and you?" I was, I, that was just like right over my head. And he opened up the sky, and I could see planets and the sparkling stars and the rainbow colored gases, but there was no houses, no people, no cars, no trees, nothing. It was just all that. And I looked at him and I said, "That's huge." I said, "If it's all of that and just me and you would not like me after the first 10 minutes with all my questions and chatter. So no." And he just threw his head back and he laughed. And when he did that, he had the bluest eyes. He had curly, short black hair and a beard, where Jesus had very long hair, wavy hair, and brown eyes. God had these crystal blue eyes. I mean, and they sparkled when he laughed. And when he started laughing, I started laughing, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, who tells God no? Number one, and who acts so stupid?" Like, I couldn't. I was not getting what he was trying to teach me. So we went back and we sat down, and he said it again. He said, "What would you do if it was just me and you? No parents, no children, no husband, no friends, nobody, just me and you." Well, I didn't know how to exactly answer him because, again, it was kind of a bigger question than I knew how to answer. And so I don't know why I said this, because I've never read the Quran in my life, never seen it, don't know anything about it. But I said, "God, your 100th name in the Quran is God is everywhere, God is nowhere, and God is in me." He said, "Yeah, that's right." And he said, and I was looking at this beautiful oak tree, and I noticed the detail of the bark. I noticed the roots beneath the ground and how they pulled the nutrients up into the tree. And I could see the little veins in the leaves and the things moving through the vein, and how that cleans the air and we breathe the air. And so how everything is connected to everything and how important that all is. So I said, "God, you are in this tree, I see you." He said, "Yeah, that's right." And then I started thinking about my parents. And I said, "God, you made my parents. You are in my parents. So when I see my parents, I see you." He said, "Yes, that's right." And so I said the same thing about my children. "God, you made my children. You are in my children. So when I see my children, I see you." And he said, "Yes." And then I said the same thing about people who had hurt me, who had been cruel. And I said, "God, there are people in this world who are hurt other people, and they're very cruel." I said, "But you made these people. You are in these people. So when I see these people, I'm seeing you." And he said, "Yes, that's right." And then he said, "I have a question for you." I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "When you look in the mirror, what do you see?" Well, my normal answer would have been not much, because my whole adult life I'd been told I was too fat, I was too ugly, I was too stupid, I was this, I was that, whatever. So I didn't know, when I would look at myself, I would see all of that. I was buying into all of that. But I knew that's not what you tell God. He's the creator of everything. You don't tell him you screwed up. So I said, "God, you made me, you're in me. So when I look in this mirror, I see you." He said, "Yes, that's right." And so I was getting that like infused knowledge again. And he was telling me, "I don't make junk. I don't make mistakes. And your beauty isn't your outside beauty. Your beauty is what comes from in here. And that's what's important. You are not your body. You are what's in here. And this is what's eternal, is what's in here." And that's where beauty comes from. And that's what he was trying to get me to see, because the world had told me something completely different. So after that, I was taken. There were two angels who appeared, and they did not have wings. They were beautiful women in these beautiful dresses or gowns or whatever. And they took me to this very calm lake. It was like, when I looked into it, it was like looking into glass, but I could see the earth below. And what I saw was future world events, which are things that are happening now. So when these things that are going on in our world now, and I recognize it and I see it, and it's like, oh, I saw that. Yeah. And I wasn't quite sure why they had me do that. And I didn't know quite what to do with it all, except to pray. And it was like, these things do not have to happen. You as a human race have to change. And if you change, these events don't have to happen. But if you as a human race do not change, it's our collective selfishness is what's causing it. And if we do not change, these things will happen, and they are happening. So, and then I was sent back to my body. And I have a right bundle branch block, and I have seizures from the lightning strike. So, but other than that, I'm okay.
Going back to your life review, you mentioned that there was no judgment, and I'm just really curious what you would think about, what do you believe about Jesus? And because obviously you've seen him face to face multiple times, what are your thoughts on what Jesus actually came to do, and how does that relate to us?
I believe that Jesus was the human face of God, that he was, in other words, God incarnate. And I believe that he came to show us who God really is. And, we've had many prophets over the years who have tried to do this same thing. And what did we do? We killed them. We have many people who even say that Jesus wasn't real, that he was a fictional character, or he was just a story or whatever. And I respect everybody's opinions, and I'd stay out of conversations like that, because I know that Jesus is so much more than what people think he is. And I believe that he did come to show us who God was. He did come to, save us from ourselves, and the price he paid on the cross, that was real. He took upon all of our sins and all of the things that, we do to each other, we do to the world, we do whatever, and he took all of that on, and he died a horrific death. But in doing that, now we are saved. That's my personal belief.
What is the purpose of life, or what were you shown about God? You said God is so much more simple than we think.
God is not this old gray-haired dude sitting up in the corner with a big black bookmark and a big check mark, marking big check marks. Oh, you did this wrong. Shame on you. Oh, you did that wrong. Guess what? You've got 20,000 check marks. I'm coming after you. That's not what he is. He is love. And he is spirit. And so his essence is spirit. He is everywhere all the time. He is with you. He's with me. He's omnipresent. He's omnipotent. He is, and part of the God is everywhere, God is nowhere, and God is in me is God is everywhere all the time. And he can be everywhere all the time with all of us at the same time, because he is God, and he is everywhere. And he's omnipotent, meaning he's all knowing, he's all knowledgeable, and he's omnipresent, which means he's everywhere at the same time. And nowhere, then the nowhere part is there is nowhere you can go where God is not already there. You can't hide from God. There's no place you can go. God already knows everything, and he is already at the end of everything that we may be going through. He's already there. He's already at the end of it, and he's got us, he's holding us all. And he's such huge love. And that's what makes him simple. It's not, like I said, some old guy in the sky making judgments about every single thing we do. It's not like that. He loves us. He loves us so much that he thinks about us every single second of every single day, each individual person. And there's 7.7 bazillion people on this planet. And if he can love every single one of us that much, and we know that we are in the divine mind of God 24/7, or we would just cease to be. If he stopped thinking about us for a second, we would not be here. And so, that's love. That's huge love to love everyone individually, and to know each heart individually. That was the big, and the other big thing that I learned was that each thing that he's ever created, no matter how big it is or how little it is, and we are very tiny in the grand scheme of everything that he's created, the universe, the multi-universes, but we are so integrally important to everything that he's ever created. And so nothing is by mistake. It's all divinely orchestrated, and everything is connected, and everything depends upon everything else. And so that was a big, huge revelation for me. I didn't know that kind of stuff before these experiences.
One question that I get a lot from people who watch my channel, they want to know if you saw a hell, or what you were shown about hell. Do people go to hell forever?
What I was shown was hell is a state of being. Mm-hmm. It is a state of being separated from God's love by our choices. Not because God pulls his love away from us, because he never does that. We're the ones who turn away from him by the choices that we make. Now, if you can imagine seeing the face of God, and because of a choice that we have decided to make, all of a sudden, a dark cloud comes and covers his face, and you can't see his face anymore. And you start feeling that separation, and you start feeling worse. And because of you can't see his face anymore, instead of it being just a dark cloud, it becomes like a steep chasm, and you're further and further away. And you wail and you scream and you cry, and you're like, where are you, God? But God has never left. He's still there. It's that we left because of what we did, what choice we made. So what I learned was that it can manifest as a place depending on, where we are. If we die in a dark place, then we will go to a dark place and experience that dark place. And since there is no time in heaven, eternity, is a very long time.
Yes.
But the only place where we have time that goes in minutes and seconds and hours is here. So what seems like a very short period or a very long period here could be thousands and thousands of years there, which is an eternity. Mm-hmm. When I was dead, I only was dead, I'm sure, for just a few minutes, but I was there for weeks. It seemed like I was there for weeks. So much happened that I was there for a very long time. And so when people say that you go to hell for eternity, it may seem like eternity, but God has never taken his love away from you. And what I've learned is that people will suffer for as long as and as hard as they need to. in order to reach out back to God and say, I'm sorry. Come to me, help me, please help me. He loves each one of us as if we were his child. We are his children. And so he's not going to deny, us. And no, hell might seem like eternity, but no, he's not just, he will shine that light on you the second you say, God, help me. I'm sorry. I love you. Come and get me. And he will. And he takes us to heaven. And that's what I was shown, that it may seem like eternity, but it's not. The book that I had written that had my first two in was published in October of 2016. November of 2016, I had my third near-death experience.
Okay.
What happened was I died having emergency surgery for a bowel block. And so they took me in, and I'm on the table, and I came out of my body, and I saw the doctors with their heads down like this, and they all had these blue hats on, and they had blue gloves on, and their hands inside of me, and I could see the blood on the gloves, and it was like, ew. So I went over, I really didn't want to see that. So I went up into the corner of the room, and I'm sitting in the corner of the room, and I'm watching from a distance. And then there's this, it looked like an upside down whirlpool. And instead of going down this way, it went up this way. And it was sort of rainbow colored and sparkly. And I thought, I don't want to see what they're doing. So I'm going right up. I went right up through that beautiful, sparkly, blingy, rainbow colored thing. And I found myself standing at this huge golden wall. I mean, that thing was so tall. I couldn't jump it. I kept trying to jump this thing. It was like these huge, thick, pure gold cinder blocks. And it was surrounded the city. And I didn't realize that I could just walk a couple feet down, and the gates were open. I could just have walked right in there. But I didn't think about it. There was this little brown and white beagle puppy, and he was jumping at my feet, and he wanted me to play with him. So I knelt down, and I started playing with this little boy beagle, a little blue or brown and white beagle puppy. It was a little boy, and I was rubbing his tummy, and I thought, oh, you're a little boy, don't pee on me. I was just thinking that. I couldn't believe I actually said that, but I did. And as I'm playing with this little puppy, I look out, and I could see this beautiful meadow of beautiful, tall, soft grass that was kind of going like this in the wind. And there were wildflowers of every color mixed within this grass. And so this was a meadow. And on the other side of the meadow, on the left side, was the garden where I had been before. And I recognized the different landmarks, the different buildings. There was a fieldstone wall, and it was on the right. And it had pink roses growing up and over it. And I had a feeling that God put that there because my favorite flower is a pink rose. And I love the old castle look, and so I don't know if that was just a special gift or what, but it was there in my second near-death experience, and it was still there in my third. So I'm standing at this golden wall, and I'm hearing dishes clanging, people talking, laughing. I heard what sounded like real happy carnival music playing, or old-fashioned, some kind of old-fashioned music, but it was real happy sounding. So I knew there was going to be a party going on. Well, as I look across the meadow, I see hundreds of people pouring out of the garden where I had been before. So I figured that the garden is like a receiving area. And all these people were coming out of the garden, and each person had an angel that was taller and more illuminated than they were. And the angels were wearing white, and they had this light blue, I, I don't know what they call it, sash or some kind of something,
Mhm.
light blue. And it was interesting because all the angels looked the same, but there were, everybody had their own specific angel, and there were hundreds of people. I saw two Middle Eastern men, and they had the long robes on and the white things on their head with the band. And they were talking to each other, and they were laughing, and they were so beautiful. They were glowy, and they had each one of them had an angel with them, and they walked through the meadow, and they went into the gates. And there was another man that came close to me, and he looked like he was from New York. He still had a hard hat on, and he had a vest on that had tools tucked down in the vest. And I don't know if he was a construction worker or telephone worker or what he was, but he walked up towards me, and then he went into the city. And then there was these other two men that walked into my view, and actually I recognized the younger of the two. He was the son of a friend of mine, and he was with an older man. And I had recognized this young man through pictures that I had seen of him. And so he walked up to me, and I smiled at him, and I was like, oh my gosh, I know you. Well, he was accompanying an older gentleman, and I realized that was his dad, his father. And they just smiled at me, and they walked into the city. After the surgery was over, I was in recovery for quite a while, because what had happened was something happened to the tube, the breathing tube, and the nurses told me that I had aspirated. So once I got out of recovery and I had gotten back into my own room, I picked up my cell phone, and I had a message from a joint friend of me and this other lady who's the young man that I recognized. He had died years ago, and it was her son. And so I got the message from a joint friend of hers and mine that this lady's husband died that day while I was in surgery. And I said, I know, he's with her son, and they're in the city together, and they're fine. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I was able to tell her that. And when I told my daughter about the puppy, because I was telling her the whole story, and I brought up the puppy, and she said, Mom, we had a neighbor that we had to call the police on because he was seen beating his beagle puppy to death, and he had gotten arrested. And I was able to tell her that the beagle puppy was fine, and he was roly-poly, jumping all over. He was absolutely fine. So our pets do go to heaven, and they're young and healthy and strong, and he was fine, and that made a lot of a difference for her. So I think those are the two reasons why I had gone back for another visit, was so that I could bring those stories back and tell people.
Yeah, I know a lot of people will ask about pets, if our pets are on the other side with us.
They definitely are, I
Yeah.
can tell you. And they're young again. They're not sick. They're not suffering. They're running the fields and the prairies and having a wonderful time. And they'll be there when it's our time to go.
I think I remember you saying that you saw healing pools.
Yeah, that was in my second near-death experience.
Oh, okay.
There were many buildings that I could see. When I was standing in the garden, I could see what I call the glorious city, and I could see it from a distance, but yet I could see very great details. And there were many buildings on the outskirts of the city, and I saw this one building, and these buildings are like made out of alabaster, and they have archways and columns and very ornate architecture. It's absolutely breathtaking. And I saw a building that I call it the Hall of Knowledge because I don't know what else to call it, but that's what I was given to call it, I guess. It
Mhm.
was it was like a gigantic library and it had a bazillion books in it. And it was like from the floor to the ceiling of so many books. I mean, every subject you could possibly ever want to imagine to know about, you can find in this beautiful, beautiful building. I went to another building and there was a party going on, and it was so beautiful. The walls were made of a rich mahogany. There was very expensive paintings on the walls. There was a blush pink carpet on this marble floor. Chandeliers was bigger than my house. And there was a man on the opposite, the door was kind of in the middle, and I'm standing in the doorway and I'm watching all this going on. There were women in gowns of every color: sapphire blue, emerald green, red, pink, purple, all these, and they had jewels to match the gowns. Well, on the right side of the room, as I was looking into the room, there were tables that had expensive linen on the table, and they had these silver trays. And behind the silver trays were these gigantic flower arrangements that were the exact same colors of the dresses that the women were wearing. So it was so beautiful. And so there were these big flower arrangements, and then there was a candelabra on one end and a candelabra on the other. And so it was just so beautifully decorated. And there were silver trays that had everything you could possibly want to eat. There was fruits and vegetables, there was meats and cheeses and pastries and breads. And I suppose if you wanted nothing but a chocolate bar, you could have had that too. I mean, it was just everything you could imagine was there. And people, there was a man that came in the room off to the left side of me, and he was carrying a silver tray that had champagne glasses on it. And he was passing around the champagne glasses. And then further to the left side of me, there was a giant piano. I mean, this thing looked like it was as long as the room was wide. And it had a crystal vase that had red roses spilling out. I mean, just there must have been 100 roses in that thing. And they were just spilling out onto the table or onto the piano. And there was a candelabra on the piano. And there was a man sitting in a tux and tails, and he was playing the music. And some of the people were dancing, some were eating, some were laughing and talking. And it was just a magnificent party. And it was just the beauty and the joy. And it was like, oh, we can eat in heaven, not because we have to, not because we need it to sustain life, just because we want to. It brings joy. And most of the time, family gatherings are around the table. Friends that come to visit you sit around the table and have pizza or whatever. So food is not there to sustain life. It's there to bring joy and bring people together. And so I learned that. And there was a building that it was like a spiritual hospital, you know, because when we die and we go to heaven, we continue to grow spiritually. We make, and I had a body, which I looked down the front of me when my brothers told me I was dead. I wanted to see if I still had a body, and I did. I
Mhm.
still looked like me. I looked down the front of me like this, and they said, you died. I'm like, really? I'm looking, and I had clothes on, thank God. I could see my feet, my hair, everything. And so everybody that I saw there had bodies, but it was a light body. It was not heavy and weighted down. And I felt loved and accepted. Well, so there's getting back to the building. It's like a spiritual hospital for people who die traumatic deaths or die suddenly. And They don't know what's happened. So they go to this like spiritual hospital, and there are mentors and teachers and angels and people that are there to minister to them, to help bring them gently to the awareness of what happened. Because everything in heaven is very gentle. It's not, you know, it's not traumatic. They try, it's so healing. And this building had these beautiful healing pools of water. There was another building that where babies and children go when they die. And they go, it's like a gigantic playground. Anything that they would want would be there. And I saw children of different sizes, ages, and they too are attended to by loved ones and angels and mentors and teachers, people specifically trained to help these children not only grow physically, but grow spiritually. Because we do not stop growing when we're in heaven. But I noticed that everybody gets to be around mid-20s to early 30s, and that's about it. And if you die and you're old, you go back to mid-20s, early 30s. They have like spiritual schools there. It's like a spiritual college. And so it's not schools like we have here on earth, which is schools of science. These are spiritual schools to help us grow spiritually. It's all about spirit. It's all about your soul.
Wow.
And people have asked me before, do you get bored? I mean, after you've done everything you wanted to ever do in your life, if you wanted to be a sailor all your life and never got to, do you get to do that? Well, yeah. If you wanted to be a horse, ride horseback all your life and never got to do it, do you get to do it? Well, yeah. But they asked me, do you ever get bored? And I said, no, you don't sit under trees eating bonbons all day long and playing silver harps and get bored, because we all have jobs that we do. And whether that's mentoring or whether that's greeting someone who's just passed on and you're there to bring them comfort, or whether you're taking care of the children, or whether you're, taking care of the animals, or whether you're, whatever it is, whatever God asks you to do, that's what you do. And it's huge. It's absolutely huge. There's rolling hills and plains and valleys. And I saw ocean. I saw this house that was sitting on a bluff, and the house was made of stone. And there was an ocean below it. And I saw the waves coming up onto the rocks just below the house. I saw another house not too far away, and it was like an English garden house. It was it looked like a little baby castle. It was made of stone, and it had this beautiful rose gardens in the backyard. And I was like, that's my house. I'm putting my name on that. What you do out of love and out of service. And there are different levels. Jesus said there are many rooms in my Father's house. Well, that my understanding of that, or what I learned of that, was that there are different levels, and we grow. When we grow spiritually, we're no longer in kindergarten, we go to first grade. We're up a level. And then when we've learned all we need to learn in that level, we go up another level, and there's more to learn and more to experience.
You had one more near-death experience. Would you like to share that?
That happened in December of 2017. So it was like a year after. And I had seizures, and I was in the hospital, and I had a adverse reaction to seizure medication, and I died. They call it respiratory acidosis, is what they called it. And so what happened was I went like up 3 levels, like up, and out, like out the top of the hospital, and I'm floating. It felt like a helium balloon, and how a helium balloon just floats up. And that's what I felt like. I was just floating up. And I went into this very dark area, what people call the void. And I had, from being on the different groups and everything, the NDE groups and stuff, I wasn't afraid to die, but I was scared to death to go to the void. So that's where I went. It was the void. But it was not a scary place. What it was at the time that I had the seizure problem, there was a lot going on in my life, and I was very tired, and I was very depressed. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here. That's it. I'm gone. Bye. And, you know, so what happened is I went into this holding place. It's a place between here and heaven. It's like a waiting area or whatever. That's what I found it to be. And I was wrapped in this soft, warm, black velvet blanket. And I could see through the blanket like you can see through fabric. And it was just like little pinpricks of like stars. I could see the stars. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, but I like it better in the blanket. I felt cozy. I felt wrapped up like an infant, when you wrap them real tight and they feel very secure and safe. And that's what but it was a black velvet. It was so soft and warm. And so I could see myself in the blanket, and I was laying in a fetal position on my side. And I could see myself from outside the blanket. It was like I could see in and out. It was very strange. But then there was God. And once again, he was a huge, huge loving presence. He was gigantic. He looked the same to me as he did when he was in the garden, only instead of a normal sized man, he was gigantic, but he looked the same. And he was holding me, this little baby wrapped in this blanket. He was holding me in his hands. And I heard him talking, whether it was to me, he was talking to, or whether it was someone else he was talking to about me. But I heard him say, just rest. This is what you need. Don't make a hasty decision. I've got you. Just rest. That's what you need. And he just was talking very calmly to me. And that is what I needed. Because if I had made it my own decision, I would not be here right now. But he was telling me, just let's think about this for a minute. You just need to rest. Let me hold you. I've got you. Just relax, just breathe, and he's holding me in these gigantic hands, and then the next thing I know, I'm back in my body, and there's the lights were, oh my gosh, the lights were so bright, and the doctor was standing next to me screaming at me, and the nurses, the whole room was full of nurses, and I look over and I see my husband standing in the doorway. And he had this look of horror on his face. But the thing that I could remember the most was how much the lights were killing my eyes. I was like, could you please stop screaming? And could you turn the lights out, But that's what I couldn't speak it, at that point. I still had a breathing thing on my face. So I couldn't really say anything. But that doctor was just like, I'm like, could you not scream so loud? Because I had just come from this beautiful, quiet, dark, soft, peaceful place, and I wake up to these brilliant lights in my eyes. So, but that was the third one or fourth one.
Just as a last question, if there's one thing that you would want people to know, what would it be?
When we have our life reviews, it's the little things that we see. It's the little things that mean so much. So whatever it is you do in your life, do it with love, whether that's cooking dinner, checking your children, doing laundry, picking up cigarettes off the street, whatever it is, do it with love, because that's what means so much. That's what moves mountains. That's what changes the world. And that's what's important to God. It's not the big things talking to 10 bazillion people in an amphitheater versus giving the poor, food or money or whatever it is. Whatever it is you do, do it with love. And that's huge. And also know that you are so important to God. You are. And, your watchers are. Each individual person is so important to him, and he loves you so much and loves you. I mean, it's hard to fathom that kind of love, and to know that you are in his mind 24/7. And that's how much he loves you. So
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And
you're welcome.
would you like to tell people how they can learn more about you or about your books?
Well, I'm on Facebook. You can find me on there. Also, I have a Sharon Milliman WordPress that you can go to. Amazon has my 2 books, well, 3 books. I have A Song in the Wind, a near-death experience. I did a children's book called A Rose from Heaven. It's there. And then there's a poetry book. All of those you can find on Amazon. Now, the poetry book, you'll read a lot of the poetry is also in Song of the Wind.
Thank you so much. I can't even express my gratitude to you for doing this.
Oh, I'm grateful to you. Thank you. And it was wonderful being here with you.
Thank you for watching the Love Covered Life podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and comment with your thoughts and opinions, and check the description box for the links to my free community where I share lots of resources, my Pay What You Can community where we do classes and challenges together, my TikTok, Instagram, my Clips channel, and lovecoveredlife.com where I share my paintings. Thank you so much for your support.